Hello, welcome to the History Inquirer. This is where we inquire into the past, understand the present. I'm your host, Jonathan Maynard, and today I will be telling the story of the first successful English settlement in North America, Jamestown. Yes, today we will be inquiring into the history of Jamestown and discovering just what happened there. Why was it important? Who were John Smith and Pocahontas? What was the relationship? How was the settlement established? How did they survive what enabled Jamestown to succeed where previous attempts failed? All these questions and more will be answered in this video. Also, I can see that not all of you have subscribed yet. So just to remind you, it's completely free. All you have to do is create a free YouTube account if you haven't already, and hit the subscribe button down below this video so you don't miss a single episode. I really appreciate you all taking the time to watch and listen to me talk about history. It really means a lot, and if you like the content, you want to see more, please consider subscribing. Also, if you liked the video, please leave a like. And if you didn't like it, feel free to leave a dislike. Also, I invite you to leave a comment down below telling me why you liked it, why you didn't like it. If you have any suggestions for me, ways I can improve, tips, tricks, etc., be much appreciated. I'm always looking to for ways to up my game, to improve. It really means a lot. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get started. Let's get cracking. Now, firstly, here's a new flag to talk about. A new flag. Now, the flag displayed behind me is called the King's Colors. The King's Colors. Now, you might be going, now wait a minute. This looks a lot like the British flag, and you would be right. Now, this is the flag used by the United Kingdoms of England and Scotland from 1603 to 1707, and then by the Kingdom of Great Britain until 1801. So this was the original British flag. Now, in 1603, Queen Elizabeth I was succeeded by King James VI of Scotland, who then became King James I of England. He was not only a Presbyterian, a Protestant, but also the head of the Scottish Presbyterian Church, founded by John Knox. Talked about him in the last video. He was also the first to claim the title. King James I. He is the first to claim the title of King of Great Britain. The two kingdoms of England and Scotland would not be officially united until 1707 under the Acts of Union. Until that point, they were separate kingdoms, united under one king in the House of Stuart. The flag consists of the red cross of St. George on a white field. On top of the Scottish flag, the cross of St. Andrew, a white diagonal cross on a blue field. So in other words, in layman's terms, the English flag and the Scottish flag got married, had a baby, and this is it. Now, this flag is different from the modern British flag, which includes a red diagonal cross on a white field, the cross of St. Patrick. I wonder which country that represents. And this symbolizes Ireland's inclusion into the United Kingdom. So, this is the flag that the English would have flown over the first English colony of Jamestown. But how is it established? Why did it succeed where others failed? I'm glad you asked. As another fact, as we shall see, it is a miracle that it survived at all. Now, the colony of Jamestown was founded by the Virginia Company, which was a joint stock company whose motives were to make a profit from the gold, silver, and other riches. Quote unquote. And that's a quote from the book Love, Hate, in Jamestown by David A. Price. Now, what was or is a joint stock company? A joint stock company was a business, a corporation that raised funds by selling shares to investors with minimal risk, as the only money they would lose would be the initial investment. The investors would receive shares in the company and thus receive a portion of the profits in the form of dividends. This enabled long-term projects or enterprises to be funded, and they were governed by a board of investors. This information comes from Britannica Encyclopedia and CompanyManagement.com. Now, another motive or goal of the Virginia Company was to find a river or strait that would lead to the Pacific Ocean so they could access the lucrative trade with the Far East, okay? Meaning China, the East Indies, India, okay? They also desired to convert the natives to Christianity and trade with them for food and other goods. All right, so the whole mindset behind the colonization of Virginia was profit, essentially. They wanted to make money and convert the natives to Christianity and try to establish trade and relations and everything like that. But at the end of the day, they wanted to make a profit. All right. Now is the time to set the scene. The year was 1606. While in London, England, preparations were underway for a new colonization attempt in Virginia. A middle-aged man, a mathematician named Galileo Galilei in Italy, who had not yet built his first telescope, published a book of observations about the recent appearance of a supernova in the sky. Japan's first shogun, Ieyasu Tokugawa, had recently begun his rule. The Dutch painter Rembrandt was also born. And back in England, in Oxford, Cambridge, and Canterbury, 47 scholars appointed by the king were laboring over a new translation of the scriptures, which would become known as the King James Bible. A new play called Macbeth opened in London. And in London, on the River Thames in late December, 3 small ships were anchored, awaiting a voyage across the Atlantic to a new world. The 3 ships in question were, of course, the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery. Now, that little intro there was a quote from David A. Price in Love and Hate in Jamestown. Now, the ships were small, too small for the number of people who would be traveling on board. And to say that the ships were overcrowded is an understatement. Okay? The ships were really tiny for the amount of people that were on board. The ships were originally designed as cargo ships, not passenger ships. As Bryce tells us, the Godspeed, for instance, was 15 feet wide at its widest with a length of 52 feet, and there were 52 people on board. In other words, they packed in there like sardines. The question is, who had it better? The colonists or the sardines? I'll leave it up to you to get the answer to that question. Now, Susan Constant, the flagship, which was commanded by Captain Christopher Newport, a former privateer, had 71 people, and the Little Discovery had 21 people. Price also tells us that in a 1985 reenactment, quoting again, a 1985 reenactment of the Jamestown voyage on a modern replica of the Godspeed, those men on board found the situation trying. At that time, there were only 14 of them. Now, if 14 people had found the voyage hard in such close quarters, you can just imagine how it would be with 52 people. Also, where do you sleep? On the floor? In a hammock? Now, the ship did have 3 cabins, but they were for the crew and not necessarily the passengers. So, yeah. Now, in 2006, another replica of the Godspeed was built and launched in Rockport, Maine. This one is a bit larger with a deck length of 65.5 feet. And this is the one that you can see in Jamestown, Virginia, alongside the replicas of the Discovery and Susan Constant. The 1985 version of the Godspeed had a deck length of 48 feet, which is closer to the 52 feet given by Price. The ships had 3 decks in total: the main deck, a tween deck, and a hold for cargo. The Godspeed was also commanded by a former privateer by the name of Bartholomew Gosnold, while the Discovery was commanded by John Radcliffe. And John Radcliffe would be one of the governors of Jamestown. All right. Now, the ships left England in December 1606, and I believe that was the 19th and 20th. Okay. So they left us in December 1606 and headed for the Canary Islands before following the trade winds to the Caribbean and then north towards the North American coast. During the voyage on the Susan Constant, one John Smith got himself into trouble by voicing his own opinions, telling people what to do and what not to do, ignoring the social hierarchy, etc. This took place around the Canary Islands, which John Smith knew well. So he was arrested for his insubordination and mutiny, and was locked up for the rest of the voyage. Now, John Smith was a military man, a soldier, who was, when he was 16 or 17, fought for the Netherlands against the Spanish. In 1601, he fought as a mercenary for the Austrians against the Ottoman Turks, was captured, but managed to escape to Russia and came home to England in 1605. At that time, he joined the Virginia Company's expedition to the New World. Now, after leaving the island of Bonito, they were out of sight of land for 10 days and soon started to despair. Now, this voyage was a voyage of 4 months. Okay. So now they were outside of land for 10 days and they were starting to despair. And some even thought about returning to England, including John Radcliffe. It was then that fate or destiny or the hand of God intervened. a thunderstorm, which blew them to the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. All right. They would soon make landfall and have their first encounter with the Indians. It was not a pleasant one, and I will let John Smith tell you why. He says, the first land we made, we fell Cape Henry, the very mouth of the bay of the Chesapeake, which at present we little expected, having by a cruel storm been put to the northward. Anchoring in this bay, 20 or 30 went ashore. That's 20 or 30 men. Okay. 20 or 30 men ashore with the captain. And in coming aboard, they were assaulted with certain Indians. Captain Archer and Matthew Morton were shot. The Indians, having spent their arrows, retired without harm. Now, after the English had retreated to their ships, they opened the box containing their orders for how to proceed with establishing their colony. A council was to be established, and actually, according to the orders, John Smith was supposed to be a part of that council, but he actually did not become a part of that because the other counselors did not like him. He was also arrested at the time that he was released due to his labor being necessary. They needed all hands on deck to help with building the colony. Now, according to the orders, they were to take their time in selecting a site to maintain good relations with the natives due to their small number. The site for settlement was not to be too close to the ocean because of the threat posed by the Spanish, although peace had been made by this point. The Virginia Company feared the Spanish more than the Indians. The colonists would then explore the James River and establish a colony of Jamestown on a quasi-island that was easily defensible on May 14, 1607. The assistant Constant and the Godspeed would return to England for supplies and provisions while the Discovery was made at Jamestown for the colonists' protection. And they also had a few smaller ships to aid with exploring the rivers, etc. Now, Edward Wingfield, the first president of the colony, was soon deposed for being incompetent for not taking the defense of the colony seriously. The colony was attacked by natives, but the colonists managed to repel them. And John Radcliffe succeeded Wingfield, but was deposed as well. Also, many of the original colonists were gentlemen who saw manual labor as beneath them. They did not want to work at all. Factions sprung up due to the colonists being divided over the best course of action. Some wanted to hunt for gold, some wanted to find the best passage, and some, who were more practical and realistic, like John Smith, simply wanted to do what it took to survive in this new land. Another problem the colonies faced was that they had arrived during a drought. Yeah. Poor harvest led to a food shortage, which led to famine and starvation. And this is 3 months. This is 3 months into the settlement of Jamestown. They're already starving. Disease followed. Supplies from England ran out. The water was bad. The housing situation was also bad. The colonists were living in tents and lean-to shacks as opposed to actual houses. Bartholomew Gosnell died on August 22nd, who had been a great organizer and an inspiration to many. By January 2nd, 1608, when Captain Newport returned, only 38 colonists remained alive out of the original 104. And when I say alive, I mean barely alive. Captain Newport returned from England with much needed supplies, provisions, and 120 new colonists. More mouths to feed and not enough shelters to go around. Great. There was also a fire that destroyed several shelters, making an already bad situation worse. Also, the provisions were quickly eaten up by the ship's crew and the newcomers. However, the colonists were able to establish trade with the Indians thanks to John Smith. Chief Powhatan, in particular, valued the supply of iron tools, glass beads, and other things in exchange supplied the colonists with corn. It is for this reason that he hesitated in wiping out the English when he otherwise could have. He also did not realize how weak the English were at this point. Now, but why would he consider wiping them out? Now, there was a prophecy foretold to Chief Powhatan of his empire's destruction at the hands of a nation arising from the Chesapeake Bay. Originally he thought this could be another rival tribe, but it actually turned out to be the English. Now, under President John Ratcliffe, John Smith had been in charge of managing relations with the natives and procuring food from them. John Smith had explored much of the area and tried to learn the local language, culture, and customs of the natives in the same way that he had Dutch, French, and Italian. It was on one of his expeditions that he was betrayed by an Indian guide and captured by the Powhatan Indians. In time, he was brought before Chief Powhatan and first got a glimpse of his beautiful daughter, Pocahontas, who John Smith describes as a child of 10 years old. Since she was only 10, there was no romantic relationship going on between Smith and Pocahontas, as a Disney film would have you believe. It was Pocahontas who would save Smith's life. Therefore, as Smith was about to be executed, she rushed forward and laid her head upon his, preventing the execution. Powhatan agreed to spare Smith's life in exchange for goods, including a grindstone. Pocahontas would save Smith's life again in 1609 from an ambush, and later, in 1613 to 14, she would be abducted by the colonists who wanted to use her as a bargaining chip for the return of English prisoners and stolen property. The colonists had been aboard the Powhatans at this point. Now she would be transferred to the secondary colony of Henricus, or Henrico County. Or she would convert to Christianity and marry Englishman John Rolfe, a commoner, whereas Pocahontas was seen as royalty by the English. And John Smith was first among the first tobacco planters, and it was because of his experiments with the plant that it soon became the cash crop of Virginia. It was in 1611 that the first harvest was sent back to England, and was one of the things that saved the colony. It is at this time that I will end part 1 of Jamestown. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in part 2. Thank you.